welcome to the BA Sports Podcast. It's week 12, and we're going to be going over my favorite top starts, sits, sleepers, and busts. Thursday night football just ended a little while ago. The Browns beat the Steelers in stunning fashion with Jameis looking pretty good in the snow. And the Steelers just couldn't get it done in the end. They ran out of time, didn't have enough timeouts. The weather did not help on that final drive with only 57 seconds left. Nick Chubb looked good. Kind of a revenge game for him last year after he got hurt in the game against Pittsburgh. So that was good to see from Nick Chubb. Jalen Warren got in the end zone and looked way better than Najee this week. 11 carries, 45 yards, and a touchdown. Calvin Austin also got into the end zone with 3 catches, 78 yards, and a touchdown. Pickens was wide open in the end zone, should have had a touchdown. And Njoku also dropped a touchdown, so he should have had one. Judy looked good in the snow. Um, I I mean, Jameis looked decent. He got that rushing touchdown, which really saved his fantasy day if you had to start him. And then, yeah, Russell Wilson got that one passing touchdown, which kind of saved him as well. Not too crazy with the scoring bonanza fantasy wise for Thursday night football, like the prior weeks. But pretty good game. Um, let's get into the starts, sits, sleepers, and busts. I'm going to go through my top ones, starting off at the quarterback position first. And then we're going to be moving into the running backs, wide receivers, tight ends, kickers, and defenses to round it all out. But yeah, starting off with the quarterbacks, I've got Kyler Murray as my top start of the week. Now, I'm not going over like obvious starts. I know this week is a little slim. We've got 6 teams on bye, and we're going to have kind of the same scenario in week 14. But Kyler Murray is my top start at the quarterback position. Atlanta, Buffalo, Cincinnati, New Orleans, and the Jets, and then Jacksonville are all on bye this week. I'll make sure to include that in the post on X with my weekly matchup analysis thread. But Kyler Murray, I think he has the potential to do well against the Seattle defense. He scored at least 22 fantasy points in 3 of his last 4 games. The Seahawks have allowed 6 of 7 quarterbacks in their last 7 matchups to score at least 20 fantasy points. I think in a divisional matchup, Kyler Murray going into Seattle, I'm not sure what the weather was going to look like. I know they got hit by a bomb cyclone or something in Washington over the week, but he's looked good this year. 16 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. He's averaging around 20 fantasy points per game. They are coming off a bye. This offense probably is gelling together a lot more than before the bye, which they were hot before the bye. So hopefully it doesn't break up their hot streak that they were on. I think Kyler Murray has the potential to do really well here. I'm also looking to play Kyler Murray in daily fantasy. I think he has the potential to do really well in daily, and he's a guy I really like this week. Another guy I really like at the quarterback position as a start is Jared Goff. I'm actually starting him in one of my leagues. He's at Indianapolis, so he is in a dome environment, which is good for Jared Goff. But we saw his previous road games, he kind of struggled against Green Bay and then against believe, let me see. I think it was at Houston. At Houston, he struggled whenever he threw those 5 interceptions. But he got back on track last week. Goff went off last week. I'm glad I started him last week. I think you can start him confidently again. And let me move into a sleeper at the quarterback position. Now, this guy was drafted highly this year, so it's hard to call him a sleeper, but not many people are thinking of starting him. It's CJ Stroud of the Houston Texans. He hasn't been good this year, but he has a pretty good matchup this week, so I'm confident in playing him. Tennessee hasn't looked good against quarterbacks. I mean, I think Sam Darnold last week, he did pretty all right. And Tennessee's allowed 4 of the last 5 quarterbacks against them to score at least 21 fantasy points. So, think this helps get Stroud back on track, helps him figure things out. This is the second week having Nico back, so I think that'll help him. I think CJ Stroud gets on track here if he's available. I know he's on the waivers out there in most leagues. People are dropping him, at least in a couple of mine. Like I have a 12-team league. I mean, he's the best quarterback by far out there. The next one's probably Drake May, who is another sleeper you'll see on my matchup analysis this week. I think that Stroud has the potential to do really well. So you should feel confident if he's out there and you need someone in a pinch, because a guy I want to sit and you may be rostering him is Sam Darnold, who gets the Chicago Bears in Chicago. I'm not really calling him a must sit, but beware, he may bust this week. I'm avoiding him. I dropped him last week to pick up Jared Goff, and I'm glad I did that because I would not have been playing him this week. I mean, Chicago is such a tough quarterback. Jordan Love somehow got 20 fantasy points though last week, which is tough to do against this Bears defense. Only 3 quarterbacks have top 20 fantasy points against Chicago. Good with starting Sam Darnold in the super flex league as a QB2, but anything in a single QB league, I would look to avoid him. Unless you truly cannot do that, then you're going to have to start him and just hope for the best. He's got the weapons to do it against this Bears defense, divisional matchup. Hopefully, he can get it done for you if you have to start him, but I am sitting him this week. He is a QB I want to avoid. And a QB who did really well last week and I think could struggle this week is Anthony Richardson facing the Detroit Lions. The Lions have looked way better against quarterbacks. Only 3 quarterbacks have scored 20 plus fantasy points against Detroit this year: Baker Mayfield, Geno Smith, and Mason Rudolph. They've limited quarterbacks like Stafford, Kyler, Jordan Love, Sam Darnold, CJ Stroud, Dak Prescott. So I think that they could get some pressure on Anthony Richardson. Now it is to note, they're banged up on defense. They don't have Aiden Hutchinson. They don't have Alex Anzalone, who got hurt last week. But I think just the way this Detroit team is playing, they're flying to the ball. They blew out Jacksonville last week. I think it's going to be a close game, but I think, Anthony Richardson, his ceiling may be capped due to his passing ability. I think, he presents a solid floor with his rushing ability and his ability to get touchdowns running the ball. And as we saw against the Jets, he scored a couple times on the ground. So if he can get that done, I just think it's tough to run on this Detroit defense. So they're one of the better run defenses in the league, if not the best. So it's tough to start Anthony Richardson. I'm not going to say sit him. He's on bust alert, so you don't need to sit him. If you have to play him, go ahead and play him. I know we've got a lot of teams on by. We've got Burrow, Josh Allen, Kirk Cousins, Derek Carr, Aaron Rodgers, Trevor Lawrence, even though he was hurt. So a lot of quarterbacks on by. So if you have to start him in a pinch, go ahead and do it, but just temper your expectations this week with Anthony Richardson. Let's move into the running back position now. And we're going to go with my top start of the week. It's going to be Brian Robinson Jr. facing this Dallas Cowboys defense who has not stopped the run all year. I think they cannot stop Brian Robinson Jr. in this one. And I like him near the goal line. We've seen Jaden Daniels be a little banged up since that rib injury. I think they're going to try and keep him healthy. They don't want to run a read option and have the potential of Jaden Daniels getting clocked on the goal line. So I think they're going to hand it off to Brian Robinson Jr., who is the goal line back. It's not really Austin Eckler. Austin Eckler has been more of that pass catcher out of the backfield, which I'm not sure they're going to need this week. I think they handle Dallas pretty well in this matchup. Dallas has not looked good. The Commanders' defense, I think, is going to propel them to a victory and help get their offense going. This Cowboys team, it's just horrible to watch. I mean, it's tough being a Cowboys fan right now, but I think Brian Robinson Jr. tears this Cowboys defense apart, so fire him up. And a sleeper I like this week is running back Amir Abdullah of the Las Vegas Raiders. Zamir White and Alexander Madison are not practicing so far. So it could be the Amir Abdullah show this week. Denver's allowed 8 running backs to score at least 6 PPR fantasy points just by receiving alone. And in week 5, Amir Abdullah had 5 carries, 42 yards, and a touchdown. He also had 3 catches for 9 yards against this Denver team. So now with him being the workhorse back, I think they're going to throw him the ball. I think they're going to hand him the ball as well. Um, with the floor being 6 PPR points for a running back facing this Broncos defense, who's pretty stout all around, I think that's pretty solid for a guy that you can find out there sitting around and fire him up as a sleeper this week. And let's go into my sit for the week. It's going to be Roshan Johnson. Now, there's rumors that DeAndre Swift is a little banged up. Not sure if he'll play or not. So that's something to monitor. But even if DeAndre Swift is playing, I'm going to have DeAndre Swift on bust alert. I'm going to have Roshan Johnson as my top sit of the week. This Vikings run defense is as stout as probably any run defense in the league. They are not allowing very many yards, and I think that Minnesota has been great on defense all year. I think the way to beat Minnesota is through the passing game. I think Caleb Williams has the potential to be a solid sleeper in this matchup. I think DJ Moore, this passing offense looked a lot better last week after they fired their offensive coordinator, and they ran a lot more motion. They ran a lot more pre-snap motion. And that was something Shane Waldron was not doing. I think Shane Waldron was hindering this Bears offense, and we can see the pass game get going with DJ Moore, Roma Dunze, Keenan Allen, even Cole Kmet this week. But I think it's going to be tough for the Bears on the ground, which is why even if DeAndre Swift does not play, I am sitting Roshan Johnson. He's just got too tough of a matchup. They're number 2 in fewest fantasy points allowed to opposing running backs. Only 4 running backs have topped 10 PPR points on Minnesota this year. It's week 12. That's not very many. So I would avoid Roshan Johnson, and a bust at the running back position who's facing the number 1 run defense in fewest fantasy points allowed to running backs. It's Chuba Hubbard. Not only does Hubbard probably have to compete with Jonathan Brooks for touches in this backfield this week, but he's got to do it against the best run defense in the league. And temper expectations because you may be forced to start him. I know a couple people were asking me Jalen Warren or Chuba Hubbard. I was saying Jalen Warren. Luckily, Jalen Warren got in the end zone. Hopefully, he ends up scoring more points than Chuba Hubbard this week because I liked him a lot more, especially tonight as a sleeper. I actually faced him in one league, sadly, and he scored on me, but I really didn't care because I was touting him as a sleeper and telling people to play him this tonight. So I'm glad Jalen Warren got in the end zone for all you who started him out there. And yeah, Chuba Hubbard, bust alert. Definitely avoid if you can. And let's go into wide receivers now. Some wide receivers I want to start. 2 guys that I think are due for big games in the same game. It's DK Metcalf and Marvin Harrison Jr. I like Kyler Murray this week. I like Marvin Harrison Jr. as well. I think that this Seattle defense, I just think that since Marvin Harrison Jr., he's been getting double teamed a lot. Seattle plays man coverage at a league average rate, and Marvin Harrison's been way better against man than zone this year. He's a top 10 receiver in fantasy points per route run against man coverage. And he's got 33% target rate against man coverage, which I think helps him in this matchup. And I am starting him this week. He's got a great schedule remaining. So if you were able to trade for him, props to you. Great job. I think he's got a perfect setup for your fantasy championship run. And another guy, like I said, DK Metcalf. DK Metcalf got back last week after the Seahawks bye. He looked not that great. It was the Jackson Smith and Jigba show, but DK Metcalf, I believe, can deliver here against the Cardinals, who play a pretty heavy zone opposed to man. They play zone at about the 11th highest rate, and I think that with him DK Metcalf being the leader for this Seahawks offense, wide receiver wise, for fantasy points per route run versus zone coverage. I think that's going to propel him to a big game this week. I could see DK getting 2 touchdowns this week. That'd be fun to watch. So look out for DK Metcalf. Make sure he's in your starting lineup. I know you may be disappointed after last week, but fire him up this week. And a couple sleepers that you could look out for. DeAndre Hopkins. I know he hasn't been good the past couple games. Xavier Worthy was pretty good last game. I think he gets back on track here. And another wide receiver I really like, Quentin Johnston of the Los Angeles Chargers. He has a great matchup. The Baltimore Ravens are not good against deep ball wide receivers, and we've seen Quentin Johnston get some deep ball plays this year and score some big touchdowns. I think that can be in the cards here for the Chargers offense, especially versus this defense of the Ravens that just allows long touchdown after long touchdown. And a deep sleeper, a little bit of a revenge game for him. It's going to be Noah Brown. This guy is playing against the Cowboys, his former team. Maybe he gets a little revenge game. Maybe Dan Quinn and Cliff Kingsbury dial something up for Noah Brown. Watch out for Noah Brown. I'm calling it now. Noah Brown, anytime touchdown scorer this week in week 12 against the Cowboys, gets his revenge on Jerry Jones and the Cowboys. So that'll be fun to watch. Hopefully he gets in there. And now let's go into some guys I don't really like this week at the wide receiver position. Some wide receivers I am trying to avoid. Jalen Waddle, been touting him all year as a sit. He's a sit once again. Michael Pittman Jr. is a sit for me as well. I'm not loving what Michael Pittman's doing. I love Josh Downs. I even love Alec Pierce as a sleeper this week, but it is just tough to trust Michael Pittman with the way he's been playing this year. And Anthony Richardson isn't really looking to get him the ball that much. He also has the least success amongst all Colts receivers against man coverage, and the Lions play man coverage at the highest rate in the NFL. I'm trying to avoid Michael Pittman Jr. at all costs this week, so definitely do not start him. If you don't have a better option, I am sorry. Pray and hope for the best. Some guys I could see busting this week. Now, the busts do not mean must sit. The busts are just saying temper expectations, expect a downgrade in performance. And Cortland Sutton of the Denver Broncos is one of them. The Las Vegas Raiders have been one of the better teams in the NFL against outside receivers this year. So I would look to avoid starting Cortland Sutton if you can. Now, I understand this week is pretty slim at wide receiver with all the buys. So if you can't avoid Sutton, fire him up. I'm fine with it. We saw Tyreek do well, but Tyreek doesn't always play on the outside. But we did see Tyreek do well against this Raiders defense. Hopefully Sutton gets it going. Bo Nix has looked good, so that's something to look forward to if you have to start him. But he is my top wide receiver bust of the week. And then my other bust is Keenan Allen. I know I was talking up the Bears passing game earlier, but I'm really more high on DJ Moore and Rome Odunze. Keenan Allen has just had a tough run this year. He is not, he's not, I don't think he's top 45 yards receiving this year, maybe. I'll have to double check that. Let me pull that up really quick because I really don't think he's top 45, 50 yards receiving this year in a game. But I could be wrong on that. I'm checking on that. But I really like Rome Odunze more. I like DJ Moore better than Keenan Allen. Yeah, Keenan Allen has actually not topped 44 receiving yards in a single game. So definitely temper expectations with Keenan Allen this week. Maybe he gets it going finally, but Rome Odunze and DJ Moore looked better than him last week. And I think they could keep feeding those younger guys. And Keenan Allen's more of a decoy, uh, which sucks, but he's getting to that tail end of his career. Well, let's go into some tight ends now. And we're going to start off with the start. Will Dissly of the Los Angeles Chargers. I liked Will Dissly last week. I liked Jonnu Smith last week. Those guys were my sleepers last week. They both had the best games they've had all year. Jonnu Smith and Will Dissly scoring some touchdowns last week. Will Dissly, I think, has another great matchup this week. You can fire him up. Top 12 tight end this week, no doubt about it. And a top sleeper for me at the tight end position. This really depends on Devontae Smith's status. I still like him as a sleeper because not many people are looking out for him. I know sleeper tight ends are tough. So I'll mention another one, Luke Schoonmaker. I think if Jake Ferguson, who's probably most likely he's out, but Jake Ferguson being out, I think Schoonmaker has the potential. We saw him get 10 targets last week, which was second on the team, only behind CeeDee Lamb. So definitely Cooper Rush will be looking out for him, I think, if Jake Ferguson misses this matchup. But yeah, if Devontae Smith misses this matchup, I like Dallas Goedert. I still like Dallas Goedert if Devontae Smith plays. Dallas Goedert did all right. This position's been hit or miss all year. I think if you can get 10 PPR points out of Dallas Goedert, that's not asking too much against this Rams defense. And I think he can deliver for you. Some tight ends, though, that you may want to avoid this week are going to be Tucker Kraft of the Green Bay Packers. And then tight end Dalton Schultz of the Houston Texans. Yeah, Tucker Kraft, I saw him out there on the waiver wire this week for one of my leagues, and I think I'm just going to avoid it in general. San Francisco is a really good defense against tight ends. They're actually sixth. They allow the sixth fewest fantasy points to tight ends. Last week, Tucker Kraft put up a big old goose egg, and I think he only had one target. So I'm not looking to start him, especially with all these weapons in Green Bay. I mean, it's like who's going to pop off for them this week? Like they have a plethora of receivers. They've got Tucker Kraft. They've got Josh Jacobs. It's hard to predict who's going to get the ball in this Packers offense from Jordan Love. I'm avoiding Tucker Kraft. I have him as a sit this week. And for my bust at the tight end position, it's going to be Dalton Schultz. The Titans are pretty solid against tight ends, and with Nico Collins coming back, Dalton Schultz is the third target in this offense, maybe the fourth, honestly. Actually, I would call him the fourth. Nico Collins being the first, Tank Dell and Joe Mixon being the 2 and 3. You can choose who's the 2, who's the 3, and then probably Dalton Schultz after that. But you could even make a case for John Mechie being ahead of Dalton Schultz. We just I don't love Dalton Schultz this week. It's a tough matchup, and they don't really throw him the ball that much. Even though I like CJ Stroud, it's tough to trust him. Temper expectations. He's my bust of the week at the tight end position. So now let's go into some kickers and defenses. And then I'll touch on a couple other guys I like this week. Just going through my I've already filled out most of my start sit sleepers and busts for the short week this week. I mean, not a lot of games with 6 teams on bye. So let's go into kicker and defense. Kicker start Cameron Dicker. He looked good last week. I think he's going to look good again. This Ravens defense hasn't been able to stop that many teams, and I really hope this game's a shootout. So fire up Dicker, the kicker. Another guy I like that could be out there is Jason Myers of the Seattle Seahawks. I could see that game being high scoring, Seattle versus Arizona. And some kickers I don't like. Brandon Aubrey is on bust alert. I know he missed one last week. He doesn't miss many of those, but the Cowboys offense, I think they struggle against this Commanders defense, and I'll talk about the Commanders defense in the defensive portion of this episode coming up real quick after I tell you my sit at the kicker position. It's going to be Cairo Santos of the Chicago Bears. The Vikings are very good against kickers, allowing one of the, I believe they're top 5 in fewest fantasy points allowed to kickers. I know they were number 1. I don't know if they still retain that position, but they are very good against opposing kickers. So avoid Cairo Santos this week. He is my sit of the week at the kicker position. And then my top start at defense is going to be the Commanders defense facing the Cowboys offense in Landover, Maryland. I think that Washington really doesn't allow Cooper Rush to pass for over 200 yards. I know he went off against this Texans defense last week, but the Commanders defense has come on. I actually don't know if they're going to have Marshawn Lattimore in this one. That would be something to monitor because if they have Marshawn Lattimore, that helps them big time. So Marshawn Lattimore did not practice today. Doesn't look like he's going to play if he's not practicing today. It's going to be really tough for him to get on the field on Sunday and make a big impact, but I still like this Commanders defense. As we've seen, this Cowboys offense is just so hard to watch. They're not good. I mean, they shredded Houston passing wise last week, but it was a lot of garbage time. They were getting killed pretty much the whole game. I think the Commanders defense makes a statement here, especially with Dan Quinn being the head coach and really building this defense up from what it was last year to what it is this year. It's a big turnaround. So props to Dan Quinn. I think he's going to kind of show Jerry Jones maybe he should have kept him around. I don't know, man, but I think Dan Quinn does a good job, and the Commanders defense is my start of the week. So a sleeper defense that could be out there is the Dolphins defense. They face the Patriots. Now I do like some Patriots this week, but I think most of their points may be scored in garbage time. They're going to be in Miami, so they got the home crowd behind them. So I like the Dolphins defense as a sleeper. And then some defenses I don't like. The Ravens defense is a sit for me. I think the Chargers offense is pretty underrated now. It's going to be tough for them to get going on the ground against this Ravens defense. The Ravens one of the best in the NFL against the ground game, but I think they can kind of open it up and throw the ball to running backs, which the Ravens haven't been good against this year. They're allowing a lot of receptions, a lot of receiving yards to running backs. They're also allowing a lot of receiving yards to wide receivers and tight ends. And I think Justin Herbert, Ladd McConkey, Quentin Johnston, Will Dissly, Joshua Palmer, I think they're going to look good this week. It's going to be the brother on brother matchup, the Harbaugh Bowl in it's actually in LA. And so yeah, the Ravens sit the Ravens this week. It's just another tough trust on the Baltimore side. And a bust, this defense, I know they've looked good lately, but they're facing quite a better offense than they've faced recently. The Rams, I know they were good last week, but the Eagles are no joke. They've got A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, hopefully. Dallas Goedert, Saquon Barkley, Jalen Hurts. I mean, this offense is rolling. Their defense, the Eagles' defense, is also playing out of their mind, and I think they can wreak havoc on Matthew Stafford and the Rams in this one. I actually have the Eagles winning, so that is my bust. So if you have to start them, go ahead and start them, but temper expectations, and they're going to be on Sunday Night Football against the Eagles. Now, some other guys I like that could be some sleepers out there that you may be able to pick up if you're listening. Devon Vele, slot receiver for the Denver Broncos. He is one of my sleepers this week if you are in a pinch and need someone out there. Nick Westbrook Ikine, wide receiver for the Tennessee Titans. We saw him get into the end zone last week, and he's looked pretty good this year. He's scoring a lot of touchdowns. So look out for him if he's out there. If you're in a big pinch at the tight end position, I like rookies Jatavion Sanders of the Carolina Panthers and the other rookie Theo Johnson of the New York Giants as sleeper tight ends this week. So I actually picked up Jatavion Sanders in one of my leagues. So this is kind of a sneak peek at the full weekly matchup analysis. Let me throw out some other sleepers. I've got Tommy DeVito as a sleeper. Let me see here. Drake May, another sleeper. Even though I like the Dolphins defense as a sleeper defense, I could see Drake May having a pretty good game. And I really like Drake May just because of his ability to get it done with his legs on the ground. It kind of provides a solid floor for him. So if Drake May's out there, look out for him. Alec Pierce, another sleeper that I really like this week. And TJ Hawkinson, if he was dropped, look out for TJ Hawkinson as a sleeper tight end. I know Josh Oliver has been getting a lot of snaps, which is kind of cutting into TJ Hawkinson playing the full tight end role back in Minnesota. But if Josh Oliver is out, I mean, fire up TJ Hawkinson because he's going to get the full workload. I know they don't have that great of a matchup, but if you're in a pinch for tight end, I mean, he should see a lot of volume, but monitor Oliver's status before you just throw TJ Hawkinson in there. And I think, let me see if I can find one more sleeper. Uh, Rashad Bateman, possibly. I know also stash Trey Benson. But that is going to do it for my top starts, sits, sleepers, and busts. Kind of wrapped up at the end with a little sleeper preview. So I appreciate you guys listening to this week's episode of Week 12 Starts, Sits, Sleepers, and Busts. You can find it on Spotify, Apple, Amazon Music, wherever you listen to podcasts every Friday morning at 8 a.m. Eastern, or you can listen live on Twitter or YouTube after Thursday Night Football, usually around 11 to midnight Eastern Time. Appreciate you all tuning in for this week's Start Sit Sleepers and Bust. Now we got Thanksgiving next week, so I'm going to try and get this episode out on Tuesday because I'm not going to be able to record Wednesday or Thursday. So I'm going to try and get a quick Thanksgiving episode out next Tuesday for you guys. Appreciate you all listening, and I hope you have a great week 12. This is the Buy Mageddon, so be prepared and get that dub. Appreciate it. Have a good one.